your code probably sucks. Not that I'm trying to insult you, no, I'm just saying it's natural. I start every project with a clear idea of developing a code base that will be maintainable, extensible, and that will work for the business in the long term. But that never happens. My code sucks anyway. In this video, I want to talk about the frameworks and practices that are, circulating in the Salesforce ecosystem. And I want to arrive with you to the logical conclusion whether those frameworks will help my code and potentially your code, stop sucking. In the Salesforce ecosystem, the standard for ideal architecture for a very long time has been FFLIB. It was implemented by the Financial Force team, primarily by Andrew Fawcett, more than a decade ago. It also goes by the name Apex Common Library, and it is built on the basis of the Apex Enterprise Patterns, which are a set of practices and rules for designing your code. And then, literally a year ago, Pablo Gonzalez introduced another framework called the Apex Well-Architected Framework, which he compiled while working on the Clean Apex codebook. And I'm gonna say it, you hate it, but it is a game changer. Ecosystem also has Apex Libra and Apex Fluently. The latter, by the way, I think started its marketing as a framework, but now it's open source Salesforce libraries, which is correct, and this is exactly my point. All other solutions I would absolutely personally, would not classify as frameworks, except for FFLIB and AWAF. Nevertheless, let's address the first question. Why the hell do we need AWAF? Why don't we just all use FFLIB together and standardize the architecture of all Salesforce implementations and make them less complicated and less costly to implement? That was one of the main points Matt Gary made recently in his LinkedIn post about why he still prefers FFLIB, and it's a valid point. I'm not gonna criticize it, but I will criticize the scale point. You see, I've seen a lot of people actually implementing FFLIB, and everything goes well when you start. You have one clear idea, not a clear but at least idea, or one business sector that you're developing the Salesforce implementation for, but once it gets to some kind of extension, you're done. You're literally done. All classes start to violate the single responsibility principle. Selectors look just awful, and so on, and so on, and so on. And this is actually me saying in a rough format what AWAF is trying to teach us. It says that your code is not about the architectures that you stole from somewhere, unfortunately, right? It is about the principles, such as modularity, coupling, cohesion, which allow you to achieve what we call separation of concerns, or which in turn allow you to make your code maintainable enough so that new developers don't cry looking at it, or extensible enough so that you could implement new features without tears in your eyes. Pablo Gonzalez, creator of the AWAF Apex Well-Architected Framework and author of the book Clean Apex Code, describes his framework as you should strive for a state of modularity where you basically have something like an internal development set of APIs, kinda like an internal libraries that everyone can reuse and build other services on top of, while not forgetting about the specific domains and the fact that you need to avoid having all the code for everyone in one place. Conversely, the FFLIB states that at a high level, your Salesforce implementation must be separated into three distinct layers: selector layer, domain layer, and service layer. The selector layer is an Apex class that encapsulates all the SQL queries for a specific object. That is, if you have a case object, you will have a case selector class where all your SQL queries will be located. Kinda makes sense, right? One of the founders of Apex Fluently, Peter Gajek, quite clearly describes it as selectors also encourage bad practices, specifically God class that can contain all the queries. It looks messy, it is hard to maintain, and every new parameter requires creating a new method with a new parameter. And really, why did we even decide that such selector classes from FFLIB are okay? I guess probably it complies with the single responsibility principle, kind of the data retrieval, one purpose to change, sure, but we also have such a thing as shallow module, when your class provides a very large and complex interface, and by interface I mean methods here, while offering kind of limited value. Meaning, if you want to get data, what is easier? Start looking for similar queries, that's the first thing you'll do, in thousands of methods in the selector class, or create a new method right here to select data, or create a SQL query right here, where I need to have a SQL query. I mean, that's it, problem solved. To be fair, I recommend using scalable instead of the scalable, but that's not what we are talking about today. Next, as part of the FFLIB framework, we have services and domains. Domain class actually means a class that represents a business concept or contains business behavior, but you're not smart enough to understand this, so let's say you have a case object, and in the FFLIB model, you need to create a case domain apex class that will have all the operations associated with the case, not with many objects together, but only with the case, and usually it's not really complex. For example, a method calculate due date that will calculate and assign the due date for your cases that you passed in right here, or mark as duplicate of that will close all the cases and change several fields along with it. Makes sense, right? One domain class for one specific S object. And here some of you will say, why is this not all in the trigger, but in some separate and stupid domain class? Indeed, the trigger is also part of the domain layer. It is the layer, right? It's not one class or a few of them. It is the layer, kind of the conceptual application layer. That is, in the domain layer of your Salesforce application, you have a class of the case domain type, which contains the methods that we just talked about, only for the case, and which extends the FFLIB class FFLIB as objects. And here you have another class, case trigger handler, which extends the SObject domain class and contains methods such as on before delete or on after insert, etc., and where you will already add your trigger logic. Very often, here, inside of the case trigger handler, you will simply call the case domain class so that it performs some operation on the case record, for example, calculate due date. And very often you will call from here a class called case service, which will already contain complex logic for specific scenario. Like right here, when you get accounts and create tasks, a lot of steps right here, this is a complex logic that definitely should not be in the case domain. And yet it's appropriate even here that you call case domain so that it processes some small pod related only to cases. This is the service layer, classes that manage use cases that involve multiple S objects or external systems. And I specifically named this service class as case service to make the point, but I'm the idiot, and very often in the FFLIB criticism you'll be told something like, ooh, this case service violates the single responsibility principle because it has all the complex logic in one single class. No, it's just me, the idiot, showing you that. In fact, you should create many services for a specific S object. For example, case escalation service, case merge service, that is a separate service for a specific task, but you don't need to throw everything into one class. But you will do it because you have no idea what is happening in your code. One service, I'll do it. Good decision. That is your mindset. But I want to talk about AWAF. Pablo spent many months of his life so that you could read his book and see the framework. I'm not gonna retell you everything. It's unrealistic. We don't have a clear structure here as we have in FFLIB if you want to get a book. But we have something much more important here. Knowledge. First tell me, where would you place this method? Service or domain? It seems logical to me to suggest placing it in the domain layer according to the FFLIB structure, since we are performing an operation for one specific S-object, opportunity. What is interesting is that the trailhead recommends placing this method in the opportunity service, since the service is meant to expose operations for one particular S-object, which is opportunity in this case. But this is not even the definition I said earlier, right? So, for the service it was classes that manage use cases that involve multiple objects. And now they are talking about something else entirely. In this case, the AWAF suggests following the principle. We should build business logic from the inside out. What it means is that inside, in your case, is business logic. For example, applying a discount. And you should start your development not with the service versus domain puzzle, but you should make sure that this apply discounts method can be called from anywhere, doesn't matter at all, and it should be represented as a general purpose module. So according to AWAF, this class opportunity discount will make the most sense. This is what we refer to as inside. And outside, in this case, will be either your trigger or batch or anything else in which you will call this class to process a specific scenario. So we got an inside, which is the business logic, and outside your infrastructure from where you call your business logic. This is good because in this case, this class becomes reusable. It is very easy to test and maintain. And actually, considering what I said, FFLIB can also work in this case. You can create a class opportunity discount service where you place the same logic and it will look kind of identical. This service suffix doesn't make any difference. But in this case, why the hell do we need a domain layer in FFLIB? In the case of AWAF, it is understandable because we build the logic inside out, that is, we create reusable modules and call it from many places. But FFLIB tells us that the domain handles business logic and enforces rules for specific objects. That is, this method should actually be in the domain according to the FFLIB definition, which is bad, because your domain can potentially turn into a mess. You have dozens of classes that do different things, and very often it is super tough to maintain. I think the logic of AWAF in this case works much better. On that note, even Andrew Fawcett back in the day created a discussion right here about whether you should put your logic in the domain or a service. So that is kind of the common problem. And even here, example 4 says handling behavior across different objects. And it should be in the domain. Sure. So AWAF pretty much explains why the domain layer can also be the problem in your application. Here it is. If you have a huge Salesforce application, your domain classes will simply start to violate the single responsibility principle and become absolutely unsupportable. But what should we do instead? Like, as I say, if you criticize, then goddamn suggest. The obvious way that the Apex well-architected framework suggests is to follow again the principle of building inside out and focus on the business logic of your application. For example, for the same opportunity object, FFLIB recommends creating an opportunity domain that will be responsible for all operations related to opportunities. That's what we talked about. That is the domain layer in the FFLIB framework. Makes sense, sure. But a better way might be to create several separate classes for specific opportunity task, because your opportunity as object might be as broad as hell. For example, here is the domain layer. As you can see, this already looks bad, right? The first reason why it's bad is because of these methods that work with different types of records. Meaning, I look at the code and I understand that your Salesforce application has different approaches to opportunity under different types. It could be record type is here, or even some custom pick list values. And combining all those types and all the logic together, you create a domain class that clearly violates the single responsibility principle and turns into God class. That is, huge class that's responsible for everything, literally God. So in this case, you have to focus on the idea of creating a general purpose module. That is, in this case, you can create several classes for specific tasks, which means that this domain class can potentially be divided into 4 separate classes, depending on the type of record or on the type of task you need to perform, whatever. This way, they become reusable, separated, reusable, single responsibility principle is kinda here, and you can call them from anywhere. And also, if you're already using the FFLIB and you don't want to get rid of the structure and you're just listening to me saying what a bastard I am, you can still perceive these classes as domain. What I would do if I were you, I would add an extension FFLIB as object to them, and then you even have a chance maybe to create something like a router class right here that would decide which class to call depending on the type of record. That is the right way of doing business. And AWAF actually has a lot more to offer than just comparison to the FFLIB. That's what I talk about today. So stay updated for new videos to learn more about AWAF, to learn more about Apex fluently, maybe to learn more about Apex Libre as well. I'll think about it. To sum it up, I think that the FFLIB framework is absolutely great. Andrew, don't get me wrong, thank you. Especially if you're developing the App Exchange product, one specific business sector, it is a must-have, like no doubt at all. But for everybody else, I think the AWAF framework is what you need to rely on. You still can use the Apex common library, but the AWAF will give you the right way of thinking. I don't think that the AWAF and FFLIB are competitors at all. I think that you must learn AWAF, and then you can apply those practices using the FFLIB structure. I think it's completely realistic. I'll leave all the links in the description, all the references, whatever you want, whatever you need, leave the comment. I will also leave my email in case you have some sort of questions. And I have to do that. I'm sorry, but I have to do that. Please get Pablo's Apex Clean Code book. It is great. It is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a biased opinion, nothing like that. It's just great, wonderful book. And it will help you to be just as good developer as I am, and just as humble. Have a good one.